The regime appeared unshakable. From the outside, its institutions stood tall, its leader projected confidence, and its symbols of authority dominated the public space. Parades marched, flags flew, speeches echoed certainty. But power rarely collapses from the outside alone. More often, it rots quietly within. This is the story of how a regime, fortified by loyalists and protected by an inner circle it trusted absolutely, was undone not by enemies at the gates, but by those closest to the throne. This is a story about proximity to power, about access, about ambition disguised as loyalty, and about how regimes fall when trust becomes a weapon. Every authoritarian system depends on a small group of insiders, advisors, generals, financiers, party elites, men and women selected not only for competence, but for perceived loyalty. The leader believed that power was safest when shared narrowly. Decisions were centralized. Information flowed upward through trusted channels. The inner circle became the state's nervous system. At first, this system worked. Efficiency replaced debate. Dissent was filtered out. The leader heard what was necessary, not what was true. Trust was no longer a moral bond. It became a political currency. Within the inner circle, loyalty was constantly displayed, rarely proven. Public praise masked private rivalries. Smiles concealed calculations. Each insider understood one truth: survival depended on appearing indispensable. Advice became tailored. Intelligence was curated. Bad news softened or delayed. Good news amplified. Over time, the leader's understanding of reality narrowed. The inner circle did not lie outright. They edited reality. And edited reality is often more dangerous than falsehood. Power concentrates stress. As the regime faced economic pressure, international scrutiny, or internal unrest, the inner circle began to fracture. Disagreements were no longer ideological. They were personal. Who would take the blame? Who would inherit influence? Who would fall if the leader lost confidence? Factionalism crept in quietly. Meetings became strategic battlegrounds. Silence became a weapon. The regime still appeared unified. Inside, it was already divided. Control of information became the most valuable form of power. Some advisors withheld intelligence. Others exaggerated threats. Security reports were rewritten. Economic data reshaped. The leader responded not to reality, but to versions of reality designed by competing insiders. Decisions grew erratic. Policies contradicted each other. Allies were purged. Enemies were misidentified. The inner circle had learned a critical lesson. Whoever controlled the leader's perception controlled the state. What began as self-preservation evolved into routine betrayal. Private conversations were recorded. Informal alliances formed. Some insiders began discreet contact with external actors, foreign governments, business interests, rival factions. The regime's secrets leaked outward, one whisper at a time. Yet publicly, loyalty rituals intensified. Applause grew louder. Praise became more exaggerated. The louder the loyalty, the deeper the deception. Paradoxically, the more the leader relied on the inner circle, the more isolated they became. Independent institutions weakened. Alternative viewpoints vanished. Fear replaced honesty. The leader trusted fewer people, and trusted them more blindly. Decisions were made faster, but with less grounding. Mistakes multiplied. Reversals followed. The regime was no longer adapting. It was reacting. Every regime faces moments of crisis. For the inner circle, crisis became opportunity. Some saw collapse as inevitable. Others saw a chance to emerge as successes. Plans were drawn quietly. Exit strategies prepared. Blame narratives rehearsed. When unrest intensified, insiders positioned themselves carefully, not to save the regime, but to survive its fall. The regime was already being abandoned from within. In the final phase, the leader misread everything. Public anger was underestimated. Loyalty overstated. Security overstretched. The inner circle assured control even as they prepared for collapse. Orders went unfulfilled. Commands were delayed. Critical moments passed without response. The Reime did not fall suddenly. It stalled, froze, and then unraveled. There was no dramatic overthrow. No single decisive moment. Power simply stopped functioning. Officials defected. Forces stood down. Communications failed. The leader remained in place, but authority had evaporated. The inner circle had already moved on. After the fall, former loyalists became critics. Insiders claimed ignorance. Advisors presented themselves as victims. Responsibility dissolved into collective amnesia. The public searched for villains. The truth was less satisfying. The regime had not been destroyed by one traitor, but by a system that rewarded deception over truth. History shows this pattern again and again. Empires, parties, juntas, dynasties. When trust replaces accountability and loyalty replaces competence, inner circles become engines of decay. The more absolute the power, the more dangerous the circle around it. Regimes rarely fall because they lack loyalists. They fall because loyalty becomes performative, strategic, and hollow. The most dangerous enemies of power are often those closest to it. History does not end with collapse. It leaves warnings. And those warnings are almost always ignored. The regime stood like an unmovable mountain. Its banners stretched across capital streets, a silent testament to authority. Statues of its leader stayed down over city squares, and speeches echoed in perfect cadence through grand halls, commanding obedience with every word. From the outside, it appeared impregnable, a machine of order, discipline, and unquestioned loyalty. Yet appearances deceive. Power is fragile, and the closer one stands to its heart, the more tenuous it becomes. History is not made by public displays alone. More often, regimes crumble quietly from within, gnawed by ambitions, fears, and the subtle betrayals of those entrusted most with its care. This is the story of such a fall, a tale not of enemies at the gates, but of allies who wielded trust as a weapon. Those who lived within the corridors of power, who smiled at the leader and whispered secrets, and whose actions would eventually unravel everything they once vowed to protect. No regime survives long without a circle it trusts implicitly. Advisors, generals, party officials, financiers, men and women chosen not only for skill but for the perception of absolute loyalty. These insiders were the nervous system of the state, channels through which every decision flowed. In the early years, this inner circle worked as intended. Policies executed swiftly. Information filtered for efficiency. Dissenting voices vanished into silence. The leader believed that centralizing power within a small group ensured stability. And for a time, it did. Yet trust within power is a fragile currency. It is measured not in friendship or ideology, but in influence and obedience. Those close to the throne learn quickly that loyalty is transactional, and survival depends on mastering the unspoken rules of proximity. Mistakes are punished, visibility is everything, and every gesture is scrutinized for hidden meaning. The architecture of power is not concrete. It is constructed from whispered assurances, promises kept in private chambers, and the subtle, invisible threads of dependence that bind leaders to those they most rely upon. And when those threads begin to fray, the very foundations of authority begin to tremble. Within the inner circle, loyalty became a performance. Public praise, meticulously timed gestures, and the rituals of obedience masked private ambitions. Every smile concealed calculation, every nod carried strategy. Survival depended not on honesty, but on appearing indispensable. Advisors tailored their counsel to what they believed the leader wanted to hear. Bad news was softened, delayed, or redirected. Intelligence reports were curated, emphasizing successes and minimizing failures. Reality itself was filtered through layers of self-interest. The leader's perception narrowed. Decisions were made based not on the truth, but on the carefully edited version of it presented by those closest. The inner circle learned that reality could be rewritten in whispers and subtleties, and those who controlled this narrative wielded more influence than any army or minister. Trust, once a moral bond, became political currency. And in such a system, the most dangerous people were often those who smiled the widest while bending the truth the most. Power concentrates stress, and stress exposes fissures. The first fractures within the inner circle appeared not because of ideological conflict, but because of personal ambition. As the regime faced economic strain, foreign scrutiny, or domestic unrest, the delicate balance of loyalty began to crumble. Who would take responsibility if failure came? Who would inherit influence if the leader lost confidence? Which alliances would protect them, and which would betray them? These questions reshaped relationships quietly, invisibly, like cracks forming beneath the surface of marble. Factionalism spread through whispered meetings and careful observations. Silence became a weapon. Opinions were withheld strategically, and support was offered conditionally. Outwardly, the regime appeared unified, efficient, unshakable. Inside, ambition and fear were eroding trust, one subtle maneuver at a time. In these moments, the seeds of eventual collapse were planted, not in the streets, not in the parliament, but in private offices, dining rooms, and shadowed corridors where loyalty was measured and questioned endlessly. In the corridors of power, information is more than knowledge. It is influence, leverage, and ultimately, control. Within this reime, the inner circle discovered a crucial truth. Whoever controlled the leader's perception controlled the state itself. Some advisors withheld intelligence, letting threats appear less urgent than they were. Others exaggerated crises, amplifying their own importance as problem solvers. Reports were rewritten. Data was reshaped to favor preferred policies or discredit rivals. Decisions became erratic. Policies contradicted each other. Enemies were misidentified. Allies were punished unnecessarily. The inner circle was no longer merely managing the state. They were managing the leader's understanding of reality. This manipulation did not require overt treachery. It worked in the gaps, the silences, the small edits to reports and conversations that, cumulatively, rewired the leader's perception. By controlling what was seen and heard, the insiders shaped the fate of a regime without firing a single shot. What begins as caution and self-preservation can, over time, evolve into routine betrayal. Within the inner circle, this transition was subtle, almost imperceptible. Private conversations were quietly recorded. Informal alliances formed in shadowed rooms. Some members began discreet contacts with external actors, rival factions, business interests, even foreign governments. These actions were cloaked in careful rituals of loyalty. Publicly, the inner circle applauded the leader, reinforced loyalty in speeches, and performed every act of devotion expected. Privately, they calculated, maneuvered, and positioned themselves for eventual survival. Each act of duplicity was small, almost negligible in isolation. A delayed report, a softened warning, a misplaced recommendation. But collectively, these minor betrayals undermined the regime's capacity to respond to crises. The louder the public displays of loyalty, the more profound the private deception. Performance became indistinguishable from reality, and in that illusion, the seeds of collapse were nurtured quietly, invisibly, by those the leader trusted most. Paradoxically, as the inner circle's manipulations increased, the leader became increasingly isolated. The very people closest, those who were supposed to advise, protect, and inform, filtered every reality that reached the throne. Independent institutions weakened. Honest counsel disappeared. Fear replaced candor. The leader trusted fewer people, and trusted them more blindly. Decisions were made faster, yet with less grounding. Policies shifted unpredictably. Mistakes compounded. Allies were alienated. Enemies multiplied. Isolation intensified vulnerability. Surrounded by affirmation and curated intelligence, the leader became reactive rather than proactive, defensive rather than visionary. The regime was no longer adapting to challenges. It was surviving them unevenly, clumsily, and, ultimately, dangerously. In such an environment, the decay of authority is not visible. The public sees order, the leader sees loyalty, but inside, the mechanisms of governance are failing, imperceptibly, minute by minute, day by day. Every regime faces moments of crisis. For the inner circle, these moments were opportunities disguised as disasters. Economic downturns, political unrest, or external pressure revealed not only weaknesses in the system, but vulnerabilities in the leader's judgment. Some insiders foresaw collapse and prepared contingencies. Others saw a chance to consolidate their own power, to emerge as indispensable, or to secure a safe exit. Plans were drawn quietly. Exit strategies rehearsed in private. Blame narratives constructed before the first failure became public. While the leader struggled to respond, the inner circle was already repositioning itself. Those who remained loyal did so conditionally, balancing duty with self-interest. Those who betrayed did so subtly, shaping outcomes to their advantage without drawing attention. Unrest intensified. Orders went unfulfilled. Critical moments passed without intervention. The leader believed control was maintained, while insiders had already begun orchestrating the regime's eventual unraveling. The system was collapsing not from the outside, but from the very heart of trust that had once defined it. In the final phase of the regime, the leader misread everything. Public dissent was underestimated. Loyalists were overestimated. Advisors reassured rather than informed. Security forces were overstretched, distracted, or quietly reluctant. The inner circle, masters of manipulation, presented carefully curated perceptions. Threats were softened, alliances overemphasized, and critical decisions delayed. In these final months, each misstep compounded the next. The leader, surrounded by affirmation yet starved of truth, made choices that seemed rational but were dangerously flawed. Orders went unexecuted. Policies contradicted each other. Emergencies were met with paralysis. The regime did not fall through a single catastrophic error, but through a series of cumulative miscalculations, each guided by those closest to the throne. In the end, control was illusory. Authority remained in name alone, while power itself had quietly slipped through the fingers of the leader and into the hands of those who had once sworn loyalty. There was no dramatic overthrow, no single decisive battle, no mob storming the gates. Instead, power simply ceased to function. Officials abandoned their posts. Military units hesitated. Communications failed. Critical decisions were ignored or contradicted. The leader remained physically in place, but the authority they once wielded had evaporated. This was the quiet violence of betrayal. The inner circle, the very group entrusted with sustaining the regime, had already repositioned themselves, ensuring personal survival as the state crumbled around them. They were architects of the collapse, yet unseen architects, their fingerprints invisible, their motivations inscrutable. The populace witnessed a regime unravel, yet could not fully perceive the invisible hands that loosened every knot of control. History records only the surface, the visible fall, the public chaos. The more profound collapse, the decay of trust within, remains hidden, understood only by those who watched it unfold from within the halls of power. After the collapse, former insiders became critics, victims, or sages. Each sought to distance themselves from the decay they had quietly nurtured. Responsibility dissolved into collective amnesia, and public narratives painted villains and heroes in stark contrast to the murky reality. Those who had manipulated information now shaped the post-regime story. Allegiances shifted, memoirs were written, and historical accounts carefully edited. The truth, that the regime fell because its system rewarded deception and suppressed honesty, was far less satisfying to recount than the drama of revolt or conspiracy. The lesson is simple, yet often ignored. Regimes rarely fail from the outside alone. They fail because loyalty becomes performative, competence is subordinated to survival, and trust, when weaponized, can be more destructive than any army. History repeats. Patterns re-emerge in empires, dynasties, and states around the world. When inner circles prioritize self-interest over truth, decay becomes inevitable. Collapse, when it comes, is as quiet as a whisper and as total as a thunderclap. History does not always end with explosions or dramatic confrontations. Often, it concludes in silence, in the invisible decay of institutions, in the subtle betrayals that go unnoticed until the moment of collapse. The most dangerous enemies of power are not the external forces arrayed against a regime, but those who sit closest to the throne. Advisors, confidants, generals, and financiers, the inner circle, hold the levers of reality itself. When their loyalty becomes performative, when ambition outweighs honesty, the state begins to crumble quietly from within. Regimes fall not only because of revolution or invasion, but because trust is weaponized, because the systems designed to sustain authority instead enable its destruction. This pattern repeats across centuries, across continents, in empires and democracies alike. The faces change, the ideologies differ, yet the mechanics remain the same. For those who study history, the lesson is unyielding and stark. Observe the inner circle. Watch how loyalty is performed. Note what is withheld, what is exaggerated, what is concealed. The rise and fall of states is rarely decided in public squares. It is decided in private chambers, over whispered conversations, in the careful edits to reports and speeches that shape what a leader believes to be true. And in that quiet, hidden world, power is both most absolute and most fragile. The story of a trusted inner circle destroying a regime is not simply a tale of betrayal. It is a warning that the greatest danger to any power lies not at its borders, but in its very heart. History whispers its lessons. The challenge is whether we listen. The regime stood like an unmovable mountain. Its banners stretched across capital streets, a silent testament to authority. Statues of its leader stayed down over city squares, and speeches echoed in perfect cadence through grand halls, commanding obedience with every word. From the outside, it appeared impregnable, a machine of order, discipline, and unquestioned loyalty. Yet appearances deceive. Power is fragile, and the closer one stands to its heart, the more tenuous it becomes. History is not made by public displays alone. More often, regimes crumble quietly from within, gnawed by ambitions, fears, and the subtle betrayals of those entrusted most with its key. No regime survives long without a circle it trusts implicitly. Advisors, generals, party officials, financiers, men and women chosen not only for skill but for the perception of absolute loyalty. These insiders were the nervous system of the state, channels through which every decision flowed. In the early years, this inner circle worked as intended. Policies executed swiftly, information filtered for efficiency. Dissenting voices vanished into silence. The leader believed that centralizing power within a small group ensured stability. And for a time, it did. Yet trust within power is a fragile currency. It is measured not in friendship or ideology, but in influence and obedience. Those close to the throne learn quickly that loyalty is transactional, and survival depends on mastering the unspoken rules of proximity. Mistakes are punished, visibility is everything, and every gesture is scrutinized for hidden meaning. The regime stood like an unmovable mountain. Its banners stretched across capital streets, a silent testament to authority. Statues of its leader stayed down over city squares, and speeches echoed in perfect cadence through grand halls, commanding obedience with every word. From the outside, it appeared impregnable, a machine of order, discipline, and unquestioned loyalty. Yet appearances deceive. Power is fragile. The closer one stands to its heart, the more tenuous it becomes. History is not made by public displays alone. More often, regimes crumble quietly from within, gnawed by ambitions, fears, and the subtle betrayals of those entrusted most with its key. No regime survives long without a circle it trusts implicitly. Advisors, generals, party officials, financiers, chosen not only for skill but for perceived loyalty. These insiders were the nervous system of the state, channels through which every decision flowed. In the early years, this inner circle worked. Policies executed swiftly, dissenting voices silenced. The leader believed that centralizing power ensured stability, and for a time, it did. Yet trust is fragile, measured not in friendship, but influence and obedience. Those close to the throne learn that loyalty is transactional. Survival depends on mastering unspoken rules. Mistakes are punished. Visibility is everything. Every gesture scrutinized. Within the inner circle, loyalty became performance. Public praise, gestures, rituals masked ambition. Every smile concealed calculation. Every nod carried strategy. Survival depended on appearing indispensable. Advisors tailored counsel. Bad news was softened, delayed, redirected. Intelligence curated. Reality filtered. The leader's perception narrowed. Decisions were made not on truth, but on the version presented. Reality could be rewritten in whispers, and those controlling it wielded greater power than any army or minister. Power concentrates stress, and stress exposes fissures. The first fractures within the inner circle appeared quietly. Ambitions collided. Who would inherit influence if the leader lost confidence? Which alliances would protect? Which betray? Factionalism spread through whispered meetings. Silence became a weapon. Outwardly, the regime appeared unified. Inside, ambition and fear eroded trust. Seeds of collapse were planted not in the streets, but in private offices, dining rooms, corridors where loyalty was measured and questioned. Information is more than knowledge. It is control. The inner circle discovered that whoever controlled the leader's perception controlled the state. Intelligence withheld, threats exaggerated, reports rewritten, policies contradicted, allies punished, decisions became erratic. This was manipulation through omission. Subtle edits reshaped reality. The insiders controlled not the state itself, but the leader's understanding of it. The fate of the regime rested on curated perception, not truth. Self-preservation evolved into routine betrayal. Conversations recorded, alliances forged secretly, contacts with foreign actors. Public loyalty intensified, applause, praise, rituals. Privately, calculations and positioning for survival. Minor betrayals, when cumulative, undermined the regime's response to crises. The louder the loyalty, the deeper the deception. Performance became indistinguishable from reality. Collapse was being nurtured invisibly by those the leader trusted most. As manipulation increased, the leader became isolated. Independent institutions weakened. Honest counsel disappeared. Fear replaced candor. The leader trusted fewer people, and more blindly. Decisions became erratic, policies contradictory. Mistakes multiplied. Allies alienated. Enemies multiplied. The regime was no longer adapting. It was surviving unevenly. The decay of authority was invisible. The public saw order. The leader saw loyalty, while governance faltered minute by minute. Every crisis became opportunity. Economic downturns, unrest, external pressures revealed both systemic and personal vulnerabilities. Some insiders foresaw collapse, prepared contingencies, consolidated power, or secured safe exits. Plans were drawn, narratives rehearsed. While the leader struggled, insiders repositioned themselves. Orders went unfulfilled. Emergencies ignored. Collapse was underway, not from outside, but from the very trust once relied upon to sustain power. In the final months, the leader misread everything. Dissent underestimated. Loyalty overstated. Threats ignored. Advisors reassured rather than informed. Orders unexecuted. Policies contradictory. Emergencies met with paralysis. Control was illusory. Authority remained in name alone. The inner circle had silently guided the regime toward collapse, manipulating perception while hiding their hand. The fall was cumulative, quiet, inevitable. No dramatic overthrow. Power simply ceased to function. Officials abandoned posts. Military units hesitated. Communications failed. The leader remained, but authority evaporated. The inner circle had already repositioned themselves, ensuring personal survival. The public saw chaos. Few perceived the invisible hands of betrayal at work. Former insiders became critics, victims, or sages. Responsibility dissolved. Public narratives painted villains and heroes, while the truth remained obscured. The regime fell because the system rewarded deception and suppressed honesty. Lessons echo across empires, dynasties, and states. Loyalty without truth invites decay. Collapse is quiet, invisible, inevitable. History often concludes not with explosions, but in the invisible decay of trust. The most dangerous enemies of power are those closest to the throne. Regimes fall because loyalty becomes performative, competence is subordinated to survival, and trust, when weaponized, destroys authority. Observe the inner circle. Watch loyalty's performance. Note what is withheld, exaggerated, concealed. Power is both most absolute and most fragile at the center. The story of trusted insiders destroying a regime is a warning. The greatest danger lies not at the borders, but at the heart of power. History whispers its lessons. The challenge is whether we listen.